like everybody to welcome to the Chaos Comp stage, Jim Severino from Atlassian, talking about how they do incident management.
Hello and good morning from Sydney. I'm Jim and welcome to Lessons from Incident Management at Atlassian. From 2016 to 2019, I was responsible for Atlassian's incident and postmortem processes. My job was to make sure that when things broke, we did the right things and we learned from our experiences so they didn't break like that again. I had a small team of technical program managers in our SRE group, and over that time, we managed hundreds of major incidents and we trained the rest of the company to do the same. In this talk, I want to share with you some of the key things that we learned along the way. So let's start with the story from one of those incidents. It's January 2017. I'm in a meeting with some other SRE folks. We're looking at some stuff in Jira, but then it stops responding. That's a little concerning, I think. A quick look at the company chat shows that it's filled with "is X down for everyone or just me?" where X is a frighteningly large set of systems across the whole company. It looks like there's a big outage in progress. We see that our customers are getting errors. Atlassian can't sell any stuff. Our website is off the air. And as the icing on the cake, our support system has also failed so that when people try to get help, they can't. Someone gets paged and I ask them, "Are you the on-call major incident manager right now?" And they say, "Oh yeah," just as both of the company's founders walk in and ask what's going on in very serious voices. If anything like this has ever happened at your company, then you should find this talk valuable. And this little poll has popped up to find out about that. So the modern world is powered by always-on software. Nobody can be 9 to 5 anymore. Our services need to run 24/7. And the merger of development and operations has made the time between commit and production shorter than ever. Our engineering teams are constantly making changes to heavily used SaaS products used by people around the globe all day, every day. But with these increases in demand and rate of change comes incidents. I believe that in this modern world of software, incidents are inevitable. They're a fact of life. They come with the territory of what we're doing as a business. We will always have them, and they're not something that you can or even should try to eliminate. The difference between good and great companies with regards to incidents is not in how many or few you have, but in how well you respond to them, recover, and make your systems more resilient as an outcome. That's what being good at incidents means. If your company is good at this, then you'll keep your customers' trust. But if you're bad at incidents, then you'll lose customers and you'll wear your people out without any real gain. We sometimes learn the hard way, but over the years, we found some decent techniques for handling incidents better, and that's what I want to share with you today. For some context, here's where Atlassian is right now. We've got about 3,000 staff in engineering, support, and IT. We've got offices in 7 countries and many, many product, platform, and infrastructure teams, each of which has about between 50 and 150 engineers in them. From an incident perspective, they are a common occurrence for us. What I'm describing today is a very well-exercised process on the order of at least daily, maybe multiple times a day. It's not something that gathers dust. It's very much alive. So when we release a feature and we get more than a few support cases about it, that's an incident. If we see a performance or capacity regression that tells us an incident is imminent, even if there's no customer impact yet, that's an incident too. So we built this muscle by using it, and we've right now got about 250 trained major incident managers across the company. And here are our major topics for today. I'm going to talk about some prerequisites or foundations for success. Then I'll describe how our incidents actually unfold in action, and then we'll have a Q&A where we can discuss. So let's go. First, I think there are a few prerequisites for being good at incidents in a company. Most of them are squishy human organizational things, so they don't get a lot of attention from technology people like us, but I think they're critical for getting incidents right. And the first thing is clear single-person accountability for incidents at your company or what happens when things break. If incidents are important to your organization, which I hope they are, then you need to make someone responsible for them. That person needs time to understand and measure how incidents are working, to figure out what a good outcome means, and then they need to be able to make changes to the process or to control the process. And this was my job for 3 years. But I suspect in lots of organizations, this responsibility isn't so well defined. That's how it was at Atlassian when I started out. Things would break, everyone would rally and fix it, but how that worked varied depending on who was around and other circumstances. If we were lucky, the people who knew how to fix it were there, but if they were on vacation, then it was, plan B, I guess, and the results tended to vary a lot. But to be clear, Responsibility for your incident process is not accountability for the reliability of everything. They're different. If you remember my theory, incidents are an inevitable part of our lives. And your goal as the owner of the incident process is to make response and recovery work as well as you can. And when you have an incident, it doesn't mean that you failed. Quite on the contrary, it's useful to frame incidents as one of my favorite quotes here, an unplanned investment in the reliability of your service. If you turn incidents into a positive, it puts focus on the opportunities for improvement instead of whose fault it was that things broke. Next thing you have to do is decide what qualifies as an incident at your organization. There are a few industry standard definitions like ITIL that you could use, but for us as a company that mainly builds and runs software systems, those standard definitions didn't quite work. What we found was useful was to define an incident in terms of what level of business impact merits an exceptional response. So if an event has enough business impact and is urgent enough, then we call that an incident and we handle it as such. In other words, if a given situation would benefit from running by the incident process, then go ahead and call that situation an incident. We found that this definition works really well in practice. It doesn't get bogged down in semantics, which is important for something that needs to be useful during emergencies. It's also useful for distinguishing incidents from things that are broken but are not incidents. And we make that distinction clear on our severity guidelines. And these set out how a given class of event maps to the severity rating. And why do I say guide and not rule here? That's intentional. It's because incidents are messy and incident severity is an inexact science. You can't and shouldn't try to define the severity for every possible incident that you could have. And if you did, your severity guidelines would be huge and unusable. Instead, they should be broad, concise, and understandable so that they're useful during an incident when people are in a big hurry. And if you do that, you end up with something like this, with descriptions of the business impacts in the rows and columns with different levels of systems criticality. We have one of these tables for each of our products, so it's not quite this concise in the real world. Think of this, but twice as big and multiply by 12. But it's still easy to use and useful during emergencies. You might be wondering, if all you've got are guidelines, then how do you know you're responding appropriately? It seems like it would be pretty easy for someone to look at this and, for example, interpret broken in some unusual way and leave something overnight that really should have been escalated. And what do you do about that? Without making this table useless by adding heaps of detail, what we decided to do was make the incident manager the decision maker, the sole decision maker for severity for the incidents that they run. We give them these broad guidelines and we teach them the basis for those guidelines, but we make it clear that setting that severity is their decision alone and they're accountable for making the right call. If an incident manager says something is a Sev 1, then it's a Sev 1. This means that the IM can dial up and down the company's response as the situation demands. It also makes incident management more of a leadership role, which is important, where you're making decisions, which is what it should be. It's leadership during high stakes emergencies. And they're not just doing checklist admin. And there's a bit of a backstory here. Initially, we let anyone who is trained manage major incidents, from the most junior people in the organization on up, whether they were, super experienced or not. But what we found was that when less senior staff were called on to manage a real emergency, they often struggled to lead and drive the response effectively. So we thought about what behaviors we were seeing versus what we needed, and we realized that those were mostly the same behaviors that we expected day to day from our engineering leaders: decisiveness, clear communication, ability to delegate, ability to do a dozen things at once, and that kind of stuff. So what we did was staff our major incident manager rosters from our engineering leaders, typically managers of team leads. And we found that it suited them quite well because they had more skills and experience in the relevant areas. So we set the expectation that our incident managers are the decision makers about the severity of their incidents, guided by our guidelines. This is a big responsibility, but it's not a new thing for them. It's not a new thing for these people who we staffed our rosters with, and it empowers them to do their job better. Of course, we support them with layers of escalation, and we have a good blameless culture because we don't want our IMs to feel excessive personal risk when they're in the hot seat. Next, you need to figure out how severity maps to priority so you can tell what other work will get preempted by an incident of a given severity. At Atlassian, we use a pretty normal 4-point scale where 0 is huge impact and 3 is minor. We put the threshold where an incident can preempt any other work at the company at Sev 2, which we call major. Anything Sev 2 or higher will take precedence over any other work, wake people up, etc. We know that this level of response is appropriate because we set the business impact threshold for Sev2 to be bigger than any other business as usual work anywhere in the company. So in other words, we decided how bad an incident needed to be before we start waking people up and pulling them off of other things. And we made that threshold Sev2, and we created our severity guidelines on that basis. And the whole point of these fundamentals, this mapping of business impact to severity to priority, is to tie together all of these concepts about definition of an incident and accountability for the process, the authority of the incident manager, and severity guidelines into a practical way to run incidents within an organization that keeps your level of response proportional to the impact of an incident. And it means that incidents are not just the job of one team. It lets you leverage your leaders to take active roles in incidents and gives them an opportunity to shine as leaders. Finally, these let you make good decisions quickly during an incident, which leads to better results for your customers. So this is what I see as the prerequisites, kind of the organizational dynamics around incidents that you can put in place to get good at them. So now I want to take you through Atlassian's incident process and highlight some of the design choices that we made. But process is a boring word, so let's just call it what happens when things break. It starts with something breaking on the left and ends with resolution on the right. I'm not going to go through this chart in detail, but you can check out the recording if you want to take a closer look. The top fork there is what we call a major incident. From the incident manager's point of view, an incident looks like this. You start by claiming the IM role, create communication channels, try to figure out what the business impact is, tell people about it, bring the right people in, give them roles to play, develop theories, do work, observe results, and repeat until resolution. Before I get into the details of that, a word about training. If you don't tell people what to do in an emergency, they're going to need to work it out for themselves, which is unlikely to go well. So I think it's valuable to train people. Incidents are fast-moving, high-pressure situations, which are exactly the best things to give people training on. At Atlassian, all staff do a 1-hour basic training course, which teaches how to recognize an incident, what to do when you see one, and how to work as part of an incident team. We train our major incident managers much more rigorously, starting with a 4-hour group class, then an apprenticeship period, and then finally they can fly solo. Training primes your people to be effective in an emergency and not get hung up on things like what the different severities mean, what the different roles do, or how to communicate. Training can't completely replace experience in actual incidents, but it does help people come up to speed faster and have a less stressful time. It can be whatever's appropriate for your company, just a page that you share, all the way to a formal face-to-face class. For us, that 1-hour online training class was one of the best investments we made. So I highly recommend training. Okay, how do incidents get created? When there's some impact detected, either by humans or by monitoring, data representing an incident gets created in a system that keeps track of it, like OpsGenie or Jira or whatever you use. That data will be your source of truth for the incident, where it gets tracked through its entire lifetime. Generally, you want to make incident creation as simple and concise as possible because the cost of friction at this time is high. Put yourself in the shoes of a person who just noticed something's broken. You know something's up, you think it might be bad, and you want to kick off a response. You don't need to be filling in a massive form in order to do that. You want more of a big red button type of interface with just the essential details. What do you see? How bad is it? And which bit do you think is broken, if you know? That really should be all that you need to know to kick off an incident response. And that's our first principle. Everything about an incident needs to be simple. If you want it to work during an emergency, then make it and keep it really simple. It's the KISS rule. Keep it super simple if you're familiar with that. Next step. It's critical that everyone is really super clear that an incident response is underway and who's leading it. This is the same reason that the chief firefighter has a different colored helmet, so everyone knows who's in charge. When the IM takes command of an incident and starts driving it, people need to be able to see that. What's happening has to be super obvious. Questions like, is this incident being managed, or who is the IM should never need to be asked. This helps focus people and prevents multiple responses from spawning. At Atlassian, we have a well-known place where anyone can check for incidents in process. We also show them on that big red button when they go to create an incident. They'll see if there's already one underway. They'll see a list of open incidents there. So we make that very obvious when there's a response rolling and who's running it. Next step, if you want your team to be able to communicate, you've got to set up the channels for that. Some people have strong opinions about the best ways for incident teams to communicate. Typically, you'll have the chat is best people on one side, that's all you need, and everyone else on the other side. But it's my experience that incident team communications don't have to be limited to just one medium, because different medium have different advantages, so we should use each of them for what they're best at. As human beings, we are optimized to communicate face-to-face at the same place and time like we all are right now. And if you all happen to be in the same place, then it's natural to just talk to each other about what's happening. The next best thing is a group video call on Zoom or Google Meet or Big Marker or whatever. But chat is also great, right? You get a timestamp record of who said what, when, which is critical for incidents. Or if you join partway through, you can scroll back up and see what happened before. You can share links and log lines and charts like this one. So chat is fantastic. It's vital, you need it. But on the other hand, it's hard to make everyone who joins it scroll all the way up and read all the chat just to understand what's going on, especially for bigger, longer running or more complicated incidents. And you also need somewhere else to keep track of the incident state, what the impact is, what changes you've made, what your theories and streams of work are. And we find that any shared simultaneously editable document like a Google Doc or a Confluence page is really good for this. So at Atlassian, our teams use all three of these things simultaneously to communicate. Each medium is good for different things, and we use each of them for what they're best at. But if you got three communication channels for every incident, you don't want to be clicking around and setting all these things up when you're trying to get a response kicked off. Time and attention are at a premium right now. So this is a very good place to invest in automation and make one like setup comms button that automatically sets up all of the incident team communications channels without anyone having to think about it. And this makes the early stages of an incident more predictable and consistent. And because of that consistency and the fact that you trained everyone, the people who need to join the response team already know how. Systems that manage incidents almost always have features in this area, like how Opsgenie has the incident command center, or you can make your own automation, which is what we did with Jira webhooks. So this highlights our second design principle around incidents, which is to focus your automation efforts early in the incident lifecycle, what I call the first 20 minutes. This is the part of the incidents where what you know is at a minimum, so anything automatic and predictable is really good value here. Okay, next, you got to look at the impact and decide if we're running at the right severity. You remember how we kept incident creation simple and low friction, that big red button? Initial severity was set by automation or by the human who reported the incident. Now, the incident manager needs to quickly validate severity by finding out what we know and assessing the business impact. Typically, this means asking first responders what they're seeing and then checking it against the severity guidelines. And sometimes this is challenging because first responders might not know how the breakage that they're seeing affects the customer experience. What you really want here is good monitoring, something that resembles closely how your customers use your systems, so that you can look at that and get some idea of how bad the impact is. But sometimes you don't have that, so you have to dig a little to find out. You might have to check yourself or look at secondary information like drops in demand. But always remember that speed is the important thing here. You need to get just enough detail and not waste too much time doing information gathering at this stage, because it doesn't make that much of a difference right now if 20% or 80% of your customers can't use your product. It's top priority either way. And if you can't tell, it's better to bias on the high side and sort out the details later. So we ask our incident managers to get the facts quickly, focus on how the customer experience is impacted and not on the technical details, and bias towards higher severity. Over-responding is almost always a smaller problem than under-responding. Next, you need to tell your people outside of the incident what's going on, and we're in like minute 7 here. There are two groups of people who need to know about an incident: people inside your organization via what we call internal comms, and customers or the public via what we call external comms. And both types take skill to do well. In the interest of time, I'm not going to cover the specifics of how we do them, but I do want to pass on some of the key easy wins that we found over the years. For internal comms, what we found works well is to broadcast them to the whole company, but allow for responses somehow. This is because most people are only interested in if it's fixed yet or not, but some people are going to have follow-up questions. So what we do is we actually post on an internal status page, and we also send email updates to a distribution list that people can sign up for, and that our engineering leaders are automatically a part of. So we intentionally communicate in two different ways here, send content, two different channels. So most people just get updated, but they can ask questions via email if needed, and the IM can then respond and discuss via email, usually after the incident is over. With internal incident comms, it's easy to omit some significant piece of information, like this only affects a small percentage of users in the heat of the moment. So we use this checklist to help our people consistently include all of the important info in their internal comms. This is part of our incident handbook, and I'll give the link at the end. You got to templatize everything and put the guidance right there on the template. For internal comms, that means making the interface that you use to create your internal comms match the things that we need included. We've taken our 5-point checklist that I showed you a minute ago and put it right there where the person who's drafting the comms is going to be looking with their eyes while they draft the comms. They don't need to remember to go and check some separate cheat sheet for what they need to include, because they see it right there in the course of writing comms. Most incident management systems have email templates that do similar things. For external public comms, make pre-approved templates so your incident responders don't need to worry about saying something they're not supposed to or making embarrassing typos. And I speak from experience here, having once typoed Bitbucket as buttbucket on our public status page. And then for that small but important number of cases where the templates aren't going to cut it, you need clear steps for escalation to your PR and legal folks. And if you want to be good at something, you practice it, right? Comms are no different. In our incident manager training, we do workshops where we describe incident scenarios, we draft comms for them, and then we critique them. For real incident comms, we give feedback to the IM via email. We CC all the other incident managers so that they can all see constant feedback on each other's actual incident comms. The next stage of an incident, after you've told everyone what's going on, is to assemble the right response team. We're still in the first 20 minutes here. And just like the rest of an incident, escalation needs to be dead simple. Which team to page for what has to be totally clear. And what you need for this is a mapping of your organization systems to the teams that are on call for them, so that you can reliably get the right people when you need them. For example, OpsGenie does this by having the concept of a list of services representing your systems, and these are owned by teams, which are the groups of people on call. Once you bring people in, you as incident manager need to tell them what to do. Once again, you don't want to be inventing things from scratch, so we have the concept of roles, like those different colored firefighter hats I mentioned before. You can predefine your incident roles and train your people on them so that everyone knows what they do. This makes people interchangeable like Legos, so you can snap them in and out of the team as they get tired and fresh people come in. Typical roles besides incident manager include tech lead, comms lead, scribe. So the IM delegates roles to people, and then everyone knows what their role is supposed to do. And then we get to actually fixing what's broken. For this, you need to use the scientific method. What are we observing? Why do we think it's like that? Make a change, observe the results, and repeat these steps in a cycle until it's fixed. Finally, when is an incident done? Earlier, I talked about defining incident severity in terms of business impact, where if it was high enough and urgent enough, we called that an incident and we handled it as such. Conversely to that, we say that an incident is resolved when the current or imminent business impact is over. No more business impact, no more incident. That's how we demarcate the end of an incident response, the end of the emergency. As soon as we've mitigated the business impact and we're reasonably confident that recurrence is not imminent, then the incident is resolved. We close down the response and everyone can go back to what they were doing. This is good because we don't want to prolong it. We have, remember, several hundred of these a year. It's bad enough that all these people got interrupted and we're already paying the opportunity cost of whatever else that we're working on, but keeping them spinning in an incident without a good reason would only make that worse. So we found that it's a good idea to decisively disband the incident response team as soon as we've mitigated the impact and we're confident that it's not going to happen again. So that leads to the last design principle. As owner of the incident process, maintaining a healthy allergy towards admin overheads is critical. Incident processes are like magnets for administrivia. Like, oh, we need to check this thing, so fill in this giant form every time you resolve an incident. But those things have a big negative impact in emergencies. And if you let these accumulate, then your people will eventually lose trust in the system. So you, as the owner, need to jealously guard a clean incident process and keep the barnacles off so that it flows smoothly and supports your people rather than obstructing them. So that is the actual bones of what happens when things break at Atlassian from end to end. We developed this process over hundreds of incidents and found that things work much better if we remain true to these principles. And I hope you find these useful in your own incident processes. So to conclude, we should understand that incidents are and always will be a fact of life in our software-powered world. They're certainly going to happen to you in your organization. They're going to be demanding and sometimes stressful, but you can decide to take control. How well prepared you are when you get that alert is entirely in your hands. If you decide to take accountability for your incident process, train your people and automate those first 20 minutes, then maybe the next time things go wrong, which they inevitably will, you will get maximum return on your unexpected investment. Thank you. And here's that URL with the checklist and other goodies, or you can just Google Atlassian Incident Management Handbook. Please stick around for the Q&A. I can answer any questions, or we can even get into postmortems. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. That was a fantastic presentation. I highly recommend that folks go and grab that handbook because that postmortem section is amazing. Unfortunately, we couldn't fit it in this time here because the sessions are short. So with that said, questions, we are short on time, so I'm going to just advise folks to head on over to that Slack channel. I know there's a bunch of great questions pouring in. So we're going to actually take those questions and we're going to go ahead and put them in Slack so that Jim can answer them there. So everyone, please join Jim in the QA-Jim-Severino channel. So go ahead and do that and also grab that handbook. Thanks again.